Hello guys and girls, hello Ozark fans, bored now, back with you. On this video I return to Ozark, so this is going to be my review of episode 7 of season 4. The episode is called Sanctified. I think that's how you say the word, so full spoilers, it's a religious word from the start of this review as always. So this takes me to the halfway point of season 4. Season 4, the final season, split into 2 parts, and we are literally just hours away from Ozark season 4 part 2, the final 7 episodes dropping on Netflix, and it really couldn't be any more as highly anticipated. And man, what a gut punch to end this part of the season. So the first big stuff in the episode, and the meaty stuff in many ways, is this whole deal and negotiation between Omar and the FBI. They meet at this mall randomly out in the middle of nowhere where they're surrounded by all these toys, so you've got to think there's like some symbolism going on there with the writers. Now this episode does an interesting thing with Marty, because the episode opens with Marty in the past, back in Ozark, during his business day, when he was doing the insurance business with that kind of douchebag who we saw in the opening episode, who obviously got killed in the opening episode by Dell. And it's when he's like looking around the office, or this guy is like showing him around the office that they're planning to like move into to start their whole new venture. And it's, the guy's talking about, if you back out, it'll be me alone here looking over Trump Tower. And he's being very like patronizing and demeaning to Marty, like mocking his life, mocking obviously the fact that he looks at like porn on his laptop, so he's got like an unhappy marriage, and he's just being like a complete douche. And also later in the episode we see like the flashback where Marty is it's when the guy is telling him about the Ozarks and the potential there, so it's sort of all very significant, and it's obviously a nice contrast to what's happening now with Marty. And it's sort of also relevant because Marty is like, they're currently looking for like offices to set up back in Chicago, so it's just one of those things where, okay, this is how Marty started in the drama, and now he's come so far, and very different circumstances, but it's also quite, there's some similarities because of him now looking for like these offices and stuff. And it's just funny how things worked out with like his douchey friend at work actually like promoting this idea to him. And obviously for him it didn't work out because he was killed in that first episode, but it's just one of these like ironic sort of things where if only that guy knew what exactly would go down with Marty's life. He may be not so keen to like maybe really get behind the idea as like a good thing, but so we get that throughout the episode where Marty is kind of, I think he's really questioning whether to like go with this place that he's looking at in Chicago, and at one point he like backs out, he doesn't lock it down, and it's almost like he's thinking about the past and stuff like that. But anyway, they set this meeting up with Omar and like the feds, and the feds initially tell Omar then, obviously he'd been told previously to serve jail time and he'll get immunity, but then they back out on the deal, that they change the goalposts, because you've got these 2 hires up who are at this meeting, and they say they want Omar to stay on for like 5 more years. And then they're saying for him, throughout that 5 years to give them intel on like all deals. And after that, he can walk away, he can leave with immunity. And obviously, everyone's like shocked, and that includes Maya. Obviously, she wasn't in on this change of heart, and she goes to talk to like one of her superiors. And this woman is like just awful, because Maya's kind of, what the fuck was that? We're close to getting somewhere. And the boss is like, yeah, but do you really think that'll be the end of the Kaitao and stuff? If we just close down this one thing, they'll be replaced. And she starts justifying it by saying, we can have detailed like evidence and stuff, and but Maya's very much, yeah, but we had a deal, and we can get some concrete evidence now. We can get control of this Kaitel, this leader, and it's like, well, why didn't you tell me? And she sort of throws it back in Maya's face, like, quite frankly, you're sort of, you're self-righteous, and you've got your eye off the game, and this is the way it's going to be. And it's really frustrating for Omar, because in the end he feels like he doesn't have any choice in the matter but to agree to the deal. But of course Maya then, and I think she does this for 2 reasons. I think one is as an act of rebellion against her bosses, to sort of show them, yeah, you don't mess me about like that. And the other reason, I think, is just because for her, she sees it as doing her job, like she says later, even though there are sort of certain consequences. But she goes ahead and makes the arrest after they've made the deal later on, and Omar's, leaving in his car. He's pulled over by the FBI, and Maya makes the arrest. She wants to take this opportunity to get this guy, and the birds are pissed. Obviously Omar's pissed, everybody's pissed, Javi's pissed, but there's some good stuff with them at this mall during the negotiation. There's obviously Omar once again being quite flirtatious with like Wendy. She like bandages his hand up after he's like smashed it in frustration, and he's kind of saying, on the night where your husband's away or he's in bed, the children in bed, you've got an empty wine glass. She's just saying, don't forget me, think about me. So very much sort of flirtation there. And then obviously he's arrested later, which like moves the goalpost. And yeah, it's quite the twist, quite the surprise that Maya would actually do that. As I said, I think it's partly an act out of rebellion against her superiors. But then the goalposts are changed, because when the birds go to like the FBI bosses, they say, sorry, our hands are tied because it's all over the news now. It would look bad if we went back and released him now, because for sake of appearances, we are like arresting a criminal, a cartel boss. And so they then propose to them, then they just keep the same deal but switch it over to Javi. Then Javi takes over the business, but he agrees to the terms. Then he has to give like, sort of intel type thing. And they sort of bring this to like Omar, and with the promise then if Javi agrees to this, Omar will be released, and he will get immunity back to Mexico. And I mean, Omar really doesn't trust the feds at this point, which you can't really blame him. That they really screwed him over. And it's also, as he said at one point when he was like weighing up whether to take the 5-year deal, he's like, who's to say they wouldn't come up with another reason to screw me later, which is a very good point. But in the end, he like agrees for Javi to do it, but then there's the problem of Javi going off the deep end, because Javi is just furious with this, and he doesn't trust the birds. He thinks that they were in on it, and they're trying to reassure him. And there's this really tense scene where Javi gets like the lawyer Jimmy to phone Marty and just come up with a cover. Then he wants a word with him about the situation with the cartel and some assurances, and it sort of tricks Marty into coming over to the house, and Javi's there waiting, and he goes after Marty. He's there with a gun. He starts attacking him, really aggressive stuff, and Marty has to try and talk him down, has to try and say, no, we had nothing to do with it. We didn't know what Maya was going to do. And he starts, pushing this, but we do have like a deal for you with the Fed, same deal as your uncle had. But Javi isn't going to believe him that easily, so it cuts in between the two scenes where you have like Wendy talking to Omar in prison to try and push this deal and say, we can do this. But she says as part of it, you have to call your nephew. You have to tell him that we weren't involved with what happened with you. So eventually he does, and Javi obviously says, well, it's your lucky day, Marty. And in the end, they make the same deal with Javi. So that's sort of moved over to Javi, and Omar is told that he will be released in like 48 hours, 24 hours, something like that. And I think 48, and he warns Wendy, you better. And this whole thing and the way it plays out really puts everybody on alert, because like the birds are like panicking about their kids. Like Marty at one point tells Ruth to protect them if things go wrong, to like go and get them and take some money and just leave the state. And there's like this really funny conversation with them about like the difference between DEFCON 1 and DEFCON 5, and Ruth thinking DEFCON 5 is like the really bad one. It's like, how the hell can DEFCON 1 be worse than DEFCON 5? Which is really funny. But yeah, they really go to that extent where Jonah and Charlotte later on in the episode are like hiding in like the sort of mausoleum, like the cemetery, and they've got a gun just in case they show up. And we find out later that the cartel were like watching them, because Omar knows this, and he says, there was no need to do that. I don't hurt kids. I don't threaten kids. But at the same time, Omar's really like upset with the birds and doesn't trust them, and disappointed with especially Wendy, as he puts it, because she's the one he really has the bond with. But the stuff in with Charlotte and Jonah is gives them a time to connect and bond, because Jonah's obviously persistent, then he's not moving back to Chicago. That's another thing which is still very much up in the air at this point in the show. But they do have some nice like brother sister bonding type moments, and Charlotte reassures him, if things ever go wrong, if something happens to Mum and Dad, I promise you we will move far away from this all, and we'll go and live together, which is some good stuff. But that's obviously a big part of the drama. And speaking of Javi, I guess I should talk about the big dramatic thing with him later on in the episode, because even though they sort of dodge a bullet there, unfortunately, poor old Wyatt's fate is sealed. Now, he obviously tells Ruth early in the episode that I can't move away with you, and Darlene needs me, I'm getting married. And he actually says he's doing it for Zeke because Zeke, needs it. And Ruth is like, well, if it's about Zeke, then I'll go and get him. And obviously it's very wise. It's kind of like, yeah, don't, it's not. It's the best way is to get him. It's like, don't leave him with Darlene. But you see Ruth getting more and more emotional when she starts getting frustrated and mad with Wyatt, and just like sort of gets personal at some point. But you really feel bad for Ruth because she was about to leave town, about to like get her brother back, and then she just has that news, and she just gets really desperate because finally, even though she hates what's gonna go down, she's like, well, can I at least come to the wedding? And Wyatt just sort of laughs or smirks as he gets in the car. So anyway, they get married, but fair to say the marriage doesn't last very long because unfortunately Javi targets Darlene because of the whole thing with the drug situation, and he's waiting for them when they get home, Darlene and Wyatt, and he's like, come in, and he's got a gun, so he forces them to come in, and he's like, I told you, or we told you constantly to stop dealing our drugs, and to be fair, he doesn't like give her that long to like reconsider, but he's clearly made up his mind what he's gonna do, and he's a bit of a loose cannon anyway, and it only really takes Darlene offering like a little amount of resistance, and Javi just like shoots her so quickly, so clinical, and unfortunately Wyatt is right there with her, and he's in the firing line, and of course Javi's not going to let him just survive and walk on out of there, and he says sorry. It's his sort of own concession. He says sorry and just shoots him right in the head, and that's it. It's so bad because, I mean, someone like Darlene has always like played with fire and always like risked death and put herself in the firing line, so something like that you can't say it's that surprising happening to her. But obviously for Wyatt, apart from being quite naive and stuff, and I said in the last review, then sort of his choice to stay with Darlene probably puts him in harm's way a lot. But yeah, then it was just one of these things where it was always, maybe it sealed his fate, ultimately the decision to stay and married, and it proved that, because he missed that window, that chance to leave with Ruth. So wow, yeah, it's quite something really. But obviously this is gonna push Ruth right over the edge. It sets her off because she finds their bodies, and her initial reaction is then, hey, it must be Frank Jr. because obviously, getting revenge for his dad, because earlier in the episode, like, she spoke to Frank Jr. and gave him some money and persuaded him not to go through with like killing Darlene, and he agreed to do it. But obviously as soon as she found the body, her mind raced to, it must be Frank Jr., and she immediately calls him like all guns blazing, but he assures her it wasn't him. He doesn't know anything about it. And that's when Ruth remembers about Marty telling her about this guy. So she comes over to the birds again, all fired up, all emotional. It's like, don't fucking lie to me, you told me about this guy. And the birds, I think partly to protect Ruth, or especially Marty, I think wants to protect Ruth. So I think in his own way, although they're looking out for themselves as well, they don't give her the name. They sort of like plead ignorance, but good old Jonah gives Ruth the name. All right, he's there, and he obviously still has a grudge with with Wendy especially. So he gives Ruth the name. He gives her like Javier's name, and that's it. Ruth is off, and Marty's trying to talk her down, trying to convince her, you can't do this. I mean, this guy is working for the FBI now. He's like a leader of the cartel, or he's involved in the cartel. You can't do this. And Ruth is just so emotional, so angry, so fired up. She starts screaming at them, sort of screeching almost, says, if you want to stop me, you're going to have to fucking kill me, and all this. Julia Garner is just amazing in that scene. She's so mind-blowing, the way she sells the whole thing, the rage, the uncontrollable rage is like all over her face and her reactions, and that's it. She leaves, she gets in the car, calls them liars, and obviously her intentions are known. She wants to find Javi, she wants to kill him out of revenge, and that's it. She drives off, and that's the big cliffhanger, and that brings to the end part 1 of season 4. Wow, what an ending. Fantastic stuff, and it again really puts everything in such a neat, delicate balance, because it's like, well, Ruth going after Javi, I mean, one of them you feel has to end up dead, or possibly, I mean, the birds are like maybe gonna try and stop Ruth. You would think so, but it could come to shove. You could see some like tense situations there, and you worry a little bit about Ruth and her fate ultimately, but hopefully, yeah, she will survive the show, the series. You sort of hope that, but it's a very, very intriguing, very good cliffhanger, which sets up the final episodes very well, which I'll be back with soon. Obviously they drop on Friday. I'll be back soon with the first episode review of part 2 of season 4, but that's the midway point for me of Ozark season 4. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe as always, and I'll be back with more Ozark soon. Thanks for listening, guys. See you later.